Today is the day in which we finally talk about the Borgia, the family which was accused of a number of horrific deeds during the Renaissance, and it's the family and the Pope you think of when you think of all the dramatic, all the scandalous, and all the violence which happened during the 16th century. Are you ready? The Borgias, the family of Pope Alexander VI, have been a family that has been accused throughout history of so many things, including rape, incest, murder, and also like holding orgies inside of the Vatican. But are all of these true? And if the myth has been exaggerated, why has it been exaggerated? Today we're going to be talking about all the drama and also a lot of the backstories and a lot of the reasons that a lot of people don't tell you about when they're talking to you about the Borgias. So let's begin with the first pope, because you might know about Alexander VI, but actually before him there was another pope. There was another Borgia who paved the way for the ascension of this extremely powerful family, which will be such a famous family in the politics of Italy in the 16th century. Okay, so Alfonso Borgia, this family comes from Spain. First thing I need to say, this is very important because this is going to be one of the things which really characterizes them in the eyes of the people in Rome and in Italy. Okay, so this family is a Catalan family. Okay, they come from Spain. Callisto III becomes pope. He starts off Alfonso and then he becomes pope with the name Callistus in the mid 1400s. Okay, 1455. When he goes to Rome, he's brought with him his nephew Rodrigo. Nephew or son, because a lot of people believe that just the way he treated him, he was most likely to be actually his son than his nephew. Now, this is something that we see a lot during this period. In fact, a lot of the things I'm going to be telling you, a lot of the behaviors that these popes are going to be having in this episode, you have to think that it wasn't just done by them. Okay, it's like they get all the accuses, they get all the faults, but a lot of the popes are having these kind of behaviors during this period. And one of the behaviors is that when you become pope, you kind of get your nephews and you make them into cardinals. Okay, so you bring along your nephews and you try to give them as much power as possible. In fact, the word nepotism in English comes from the Italian word nipote. Nephew, in fact, which is written with a P, also comes from the word nipote. So the word nepotism comes from this kind of behavior within the Catholic Church of this period of kind of advancing your nephew, your nipote, within the hierarchy of the church. Why? Because the church, the papacy, is not a power that you pass on from father to son. It's not like a kingdom or being a count or a baron, okay? So if you want to use your position and you want to kind of not throw away all the power that you have gained at the end of your life, you want it to continue within your family, that's why you kind of need to advance your nephews within the clergy. Okay, because someone else is going to be elected when you die, and so you have to kind of put the right people in place to take a part in that. And this is also why it's so important for the other ruling families of Italy, but also of other parts of Europe during this period, to have at least one cardinal within their family, because cardinals are the ones which elect the Pope. Okay, so as many cardinals you have in your family, or at least on your side, the more power you can sway within the next papal election. All right. So Callistus III has, when he came to Rome, he already brought his nephew/son Rodrigo with him. Rodrigo actually went to Bologna to study in the university there, and he studies like law, and he's a very good student. Okay, so he will distinguish himself very early as being an exceptional student and very, very good in politics and having very good organizational skills. And this will prove very important because he becomes vice chancellor with his father slash uncle. Now, the vice chancellor within the church is like the right arm of the Pope. He's the one that does all the legwork for the Pope. So he's the second most powerful person within the church after the Pope, and he's one that actually gets the stuff done, okay? This is one of the reasons why people are going to be starting to side-eye him, because at this point he's in his 20s. He's very young to have that position, okay? So yes, it's normal to advance your nephews, but maybe making them straight away vice chancellor, like straight away cardinal and then vice chancellor straight away. People are kind of side-eyeing this a little bit, all right? So he becomes very powerful straight away within the church. And this is a position where, in theory, you're not making a ton of money. You're not paid. Sorry, I'm making banana bread in theory today. Yeah, these bananas are kind of this color, so they're perfect for making banana bread and not much else. So he becomes gains this position, which is not extortionately paid, but gives you a lot of power. And he will slowly, so this is the slow rise of Rodrigo, which through this position is also collecting other positions, like for example the management of that monastery down there that makes a lot of money, and so you have revenue from that, the management of that fortress, which becomes very powerful later. So slowly he starts to build a very strong hold on a number of bargaining chips, which will become useful later. So money, but also just like actual locations, fortresses, that then he can use when he wants to be elected as Pope later on, okay? He also is pretty ambitious, and he finds other ways of making money with this position. So one of the things that the Pope does is sign off for weddings. So for example, let's say I want to marry my cousin, because that happens a lot with, you know, noble families and ruling families. I need a special dispensation from the Pope, una bolla papale, which says that I'm allowed to marry someone that's related to me, because you're not supposed to marry people that are related to you. It doesn't really do good. We talked about it with, you know, the episode on the pharaohs in Egypt. In general, it doesn't do well to marry into your family, but a lot of ruling families didn't get the memo and still want to do this during this period. So they need a dispensation from the Pope to do this, and obviously you pay for that, all right? But Alexander would, he's not Alexander yet, I'm sorry, Rodrigo would get, you know, prepare these dispensations, have them signed off by his uncle slash father, and then sell them off to the people that wanted them. And scandal broke out when it came out that he'd written one saying that the Pope was, and got the Pope to sign it off, which says that he was allowing a wedding between people who were related in the second degree, so cousins, and then he forged the paper to allow two people married in the first degree. This means brother and sister. So he forged a document and sold it to people so that a brother and sister could get married, which is like, obviously caused quite a bit of scandal. Now, at the death of Pope Callistus, he kind of stays in power quite a while. He actually serves within the clergy at very high levels for 5 papacies, okay? We talked about Pope Pius II. He's very important during that period as well. He has quite a good relationship with Pope Pius II. There's a very funny letter that gives us already an idea of what Rodrigo was like even when he was young and before he had all the power that he's going to get when he becomes Pope. In this letter, I'm going to get rid of this. This is gross. So, letter. We have this beautiful letter, which I find very funny. So, Pope Pius II, he had very bad health. So, he often went to these thermal baths, which are the Terme di San Casciano, which we'll talk about in another video as well. The Terme di San Casciano, a lot of people went there to kind of gain health from these waters which were coming up from underground. And so when he goes there, he's talking with other clergy, bishops from the area, because this is in the province of Siena, and he hears about something which Rodrigo has been getting up to whilst he was staying in Pienza, which is also in the province of Siena. All right, you've heard about Pienza in the other video, okay? So he's there in Pienza managing the work which has been done on Pienza on behalf of Pope Pius II, and in his free time, he organizes a big dinner party, which ends up being a big orgy, where he invited all the most beautiful women of Siena, but left their husbands, fathers, and brothers out so that they couldn't come in and watch over what happened to these women. So he's basically trafficking women for orgies at, and this is where, you know, the comparison with someone else who allegedly did something similar recently comes in. And so he's already having this kind of behavior at this stage. Now, you know, Pope Pius II is pretty open-minded, so to scandalize him, it takes a bit, all right? But Pope Pius II writes him this letter in which he's saying, so I heard about the massive orgy you organized the other day, and you're the talk of the town. This is way over the top. You need to kind of contain yourself a little bit because this is a bit much, okay? You kind of... contain yourself a little bit, because apparently he was also, whenever he would go out to public dinners, he would grope all the women. He was like that kind of guy, like really seedy kind of guy. Someone else writes also that apparently he was, women adored him, which is often what men in these positions think they're doing. But apparently women adored him and just fell at his feet, and he was just extremely sexual. Another historian of the time describes him as needing continual sexual gratification with both sexes, mostly with women, but with both sexes he was involved continuously, and he was just renowned everywhere for this. Now, let's keep in mind that some things may be exaggerated because of you know, posterity. But definitely he was getting up to all sorts, because we can see also in the letters that were being exchanged, as I said, at the time. So, however, he's very good at his job. He's very good at managing and organizing and, you know, within the clergy. And he is in an important position. Oh, another fun thing that happened during the papacy of Pope Pius II. When Pope Pius II died in Ancona, the plague broke out. And so whilst he would have been expected, Rodrigo, to like stay there when the Pope has just died, you know, he ran away really, really fast because, and I mean, I would have too, because the plague was breaking out. But he got sick anyway. But it is recorded by his doctor at the time that he was not sick from the plague, thankfully. He was just sick because of not sleeping in his own bed, which was a nice way of saying that he got some weird venereal disease. Luckily, it wasn't, you know, the worst of the ones that was going around at the time. But so he stays in a very important position for 5 papacies, and finally in 1492 he finds himself in the position to be able to have gained so much power and so much influence and to be known so much, and also to have been seen by the other cardinals at the time as being someone that really can kind of hold the reins of the papacy. You have to think that the papacy is also changing during this period. We talked about it with Pope Pius II. We start to have this idea that the Pope is not just a religious head anymore. He's a king. He's a king of lands, and the papal state has to be managed in a very centralized way. So we're really trying to kind of pull in and centralize the power over the papal states, and kind of take away some of the power of local small rulers, which have become more powerful throughout time. And we're trying to centralize it upon the Pope. So we're really focusing on his state affairs and his temporal power rather than on his spiritual power. Surely the cardinals see in him someone that can kind of hold the reins of the papacy in this new political atmosphere, which is very complex in Italy during this period. Very, very complex. We'll be going back often to this time in Italy because the politics are very fragmented, and we have very big national powers which are forming in other parts of Europe, which are looking at Italy to conquer. So there is kind of a need that's perceived by many people of something more powerful that covers more ground, let's say, so to kind of stand up to these powers like France and Spain, which are looking at Italy from abroad. Okay, so This plays a part in his election, but a very big part in his election is played by the fact that he used money and all those fortresses that he'd kind of collected and all these kind of bargaining chips that he'd collected throughout these years, he uses them to buy the votes of the cardinals, okay? He like offers that person a fortress here, offers that person a load of money. So he uses, and also in Spain, he'd collected a lot of power in Spain as well, of actual lands and things that he could exchange to gain the vote of these cardinals. And so he is elected and he becomes Pope. Now, already before becoming Pope, he had created a family for himself with 2 different women. So he already had 3 children, 2 daughters and a son, with a woman that I don't remember the name of because we don't really talk about her so much, and we don't talk about these kids so much either. One daughter dies, the other son gets made the Duke of Gandia in Spain, but he also dies afterwards as well, and another daughter is married off to like a nobleman in Rome. But really, I would say that the love of his life, and people might disagree on this, but I think the love of his life was definitely Vannozza. Vannozza, he met her when she was about 14, okay? And he has this very long-lasting relationship with her, lasting about 15 years, and she has 4 children with him, and these are the children which mean everything to him, and that he will do everything to give more power to them, but he will also use them. So it's kind of this like love relationship, but he also treats them like pawns, okay? And they are the ones that, like, this is the Borgia family that that is remembered and that people talk about, is definitely this one. It's him and these 4 children. Who are these 4 children? So Vannozza, by the way, will never become obviously his wife because he is a cardinal during the time he has the relationship with her. So he keeps her kind of on the side. She runs a brothel, okay? Well, it's not really a brothel, it's more like a place where you go and have fun and bring prostitutes from the outside. But anyway, she runs a place like this. She is a very smart gal. She comes from Mantua, and she will be married 4 times throughout the relationship that she has with him, okay? To put up a front of basically being a married woman and not, you know, just the concubine of the cardinal. Okay, this was very common, all right? A lot of cardinals had lovers, and this was the kind of way you dealt with them, okay? Their relationship ended in friendship. They stayed friends, but I guess she became too old for him after she must have been almost 30, right? And he was almost 60, so definitely way too old for him. And so he started another relationship with a 14-year-old girl called Giulia Farnese, nicknamed Giulia la Bella, Giulia the Beautiful. Now, she was actually married to the son of his cousin. So the son of Alexander VI's cousin. Sorry, backtracking a moment. So Rodrigo has become Alexander VI, right? Remember, cardinal, and then you become pope. When you become pope, you take on another name, right? He chose his name, and he said this himself because he wanted to be like Alexander the Great, okay? So very, very pious of him. So he meets Giulia, which is was married to the son of his cousin. His cousin was this woman who he kind of uses her in many ways, like she takes care of his daughter Lucrezia. So, and she kind of, I feel like she's a bit of a procurer, like a, you know, because she's the one that basically brings the girl over to him and ensures that Giulia can have this relationship with him. So the wife of her own son, okay? So she's basically, acting a little bit as the pimp for poor Giulia. But the real pimp, I think, in this situation was her brother, because her brother was the one that kind of had the most to gain out of this, and he was made cardinal as a thank you for procuring his own sister Giulia to Pope Alexander the Sixth. Okay, and Alessandro Farnese was his name, he will become then Pope with the name Pope Paul III later on. But at this point, he's nicknamed the Cardinal of the Skirts because people knew that he had become a cardinal just thanks to the skirts of his sister. Okay. So this relationship will last for quite a while. With this girl, with Giulia, he loses it, and he is like, he doesn't even try to hide this, because usually like people would know you had a relationship, but you would, you know, keep her in a palace away, marry her off, like he did like with Van Nozza. But with Giulia, he has her living in a place where she can just walk in to the palace where he's living at in the Vatican at any time. So she's basically staying in the Vatican. For a long time, she lives with his own daughter, which shares the same age. I mean, she's the same age as his daughter, and they spend a lot of time together. Even at events, like at Pentecost, the position... Oh, I'm supposed to be cooking. So at Pentecost, okay, many of the chairs which should have been seated in by other cardinals during Mass were actually occupied by Giulia, his daughter. So that, by the way, he said, "This is my daughter." Usually people were like, "Oh, keep it like..." Everyone knew it was a daughter, but you didn't officialize them as your children. He officialized all his children. And this is where people were a little bit like, dude, you're being a little bit too overt about all of this, all right? So at Pentecost, his lover, his daughter, and their girlfriends were sitting at the place where the cardinals should have been sitting. Okay, he was really more about partying than about, doing Mass and things like that. He loved throwing a good party with a load of young girls and things like this. With Giulia, he actually had at least one daughter, but he might have had even a son. There was this child that was hanging around there, which everyone was like, who is the child of? Because some people said it was, a illegitimate child of his daughter. Someone said it was another child that he had with Giulia, but he raised them and he took him on, acted like it was his baby. Okay. So a lot of scandalous things going on, a lot of orgies going on as well. There was a famous instance, and this, to be honest, I have to say that I really truly believe that it happened and it wasn't something that was just invented, because it was already described by people that were actually living in the Vatican at the time, and they describe it in quite a bit of detail. And one of the people that describes it is someone that is not usually just, chit-chatting about stuff, right? So what happened, it's called the Banquet of the Chestnuts, which is a very nice way of saying an orgy. Basically, it is described as, and this was on the 31st of October, all right? Imagine that the day after is All Saints Day, which in Italy is quite important religious celebration, okay? So there was this big party where, and I quote, 50 prostitutes but good prostitutes. They like to clarify that they were like honest. That's what they said. I quote, they say 50 honest prostitutes were invited along with a load of other people. And after the dinner, the candle holders were put on the floor and a load of chestnuts were thrown on the floor. Chestnuts is a bit like candy today, right? Because chestnuts was, something sweet that not everyone could get their hands on because you couldn't just buy them at the supermarket. So it was something, like a sweet treat, were thrown on the floor, and all these naked, honest prostitutes were on all fours trying to get as many chestnuts as they could. And the invited men to this party, I want to say white party. Sorry, I'm not supposed to be saying these things. It's alleged what P. Diddy did. So the men would win prizes based on how many times they could copulate with these women, basically. Okay, so this is the kind of partying which was going on there, all right? He did also get some things right, okay? So he was very good at cracking down on crime in the city of Rome. And this was something that apparently was very much needed at the time. And he had very good organizational skills, but the first things he thought about when he became Pope were, of course, advancing his kids. So the one kid I already told you about, the one that he didn't have with Vannozza, he became a duke, but then he died from a uncured cut that he got or something like that, some infection. Anyway, not particularly dramatic. And at this point, his place is taken by his second son by Vannozza, which is like his third son in total. So, which Italians call him Giovanni, but he would have been Juan because they were Spanish. So Juan becomes the new duke, and everyone talks about how this was his favorite son. Okay. However, this is more, it's not really that he said it was his favorite son. Okay. And this is important because a lot will be elaborated onto this favorite son thing. Okay. But it's probably not just, I mean, all his kids were very dear to him apart from Geoffrey, which was like the last one, and he didn't give a toss about Geoffrey. But he did care about Cesare, Caesar, Juan, and Lucrezia a lot, okay? And I think he cared about them kind of equally, all right? But basically, so this guy becomes duke, he marries him off to a cousin of the king, okay, of Spain, and he sends him off to Spain, and here, Juan is getting up to all sorts, all right? He's partying all night. He's not doing much of what he should be doing, which is, you know, creating contacts, getting a good name for himself, creating a good relationship. Like, he's supposed to be, it's a political mission that he's doing, going there to get married and become part of the Spanish royal family. But he's not doing that. He's just partying all night, getting into trouble, and most importantly, not like having sex with all the ladies apart from his wife. And his wife is the one that needs to be pregnant for the marriage to work out. Okay, so we have letters from this period exchanged between him and his father, between him and his brother Cesare, in which they're telling him, like, dude, will you stop partying and get your wife freaking pregnant? Okay, so he finally does get her pregnant, and then he comes back to Rome because he's kind of useless at, you know, politics and stuff like that. When he gets back, very soon after he gets back, again, he's going out partying every night, and this is a bit of an issue with him. One of the, you know, partying evenings, this is in July, so really nice and warm weather, great to stay out partying all night in Rome, right? He goes to dinner at his mom's house. All of the kids, once Alexander becomes Pope, they kind of go live with him, but they grew up with their mother, but they always go back to their mother frequently to spend time there. They love their mother and their mother loves them, and it's a very close-knit family, okay? So he goes back to his father, he goes back to his mother for dinner along with all other family members as well, and Cesare is there too. And then when they leave the house for dinner, after the end of the dinner, Cesare is going back to the Vatican, and he's like, no, I'm going to continue partying all night long. You can go home. I'll see you tomorrow, okay? He goes off, and it is said that a masked man was him, and this masked man had been with him for quite a few days, and he takes only one servant with him and then sends that servant home too. And the next day, he is found with his throat cut and a load of like pugnalate, knifed many times in the back, in the Tiber River. So someone slaughtered him and threw him in the Tiber River, okay? All his gold and his valuables are with him. So he wasn't killed because they wanted to try to steal something from him. Okay, so it was obviously a message of this being a political act. Because also, like, if they hadn't had time to rob him, then they wouldn't have had time to throw him in the Tiber, right? I mean, they don't really realize this until the afternoon of the next day, because at the beginning they're like, oh, he's probably still partying. But then, like, when afternoon comes, his father sends out people to look for him, and that's when they find him. And this is where it's important. This is where the legend comes about of him being the favorite son, because Alexander VI loses his shit. Okay, he cries, he's desperate, he throws things, he's like really like, he swears. And in it, just so you know, in Italian we have something which is called bestemmiare, which is called swearing, where you are swearing in a blasphemous way. You're literally swearing against God. So you're not saying, God damn this. You're literally saying, like, damn God, you know? So we have a load of words very blasphemous, rude words in Italian, which obviously they're even illegal. I think you're not allowed to say them in the street and so forth. That's what he was screaming out in the middle of the Vatican when his son died. Okay, he really lost it. He said to all the other clergy out loud in front of them, I would give up 7 papacies to have my son back. So this is where the legend of this being the favored son came about, and this is where the legend of Cesare, his brother, having killed him came about. So often you'll get this story of it's the favorite son, so Cesare was jealous, Cesare wanted his position, because when he'd gotten back from Spain, Juan got the position as the leader of the army of the papacy, okay? Now, to be honest, that position in itself was a problem because he was very young and unexperienced. So there would have been a lot of people that were very experienced and older than him that was placed below him, which wouldn't have been very happy to be serving this young and experienced boy. So probably got a lot of haters there already. I don't think he was the favorite son. I think that he's the one that died. Okay, so if he would have made all this drama about one of the other kids, that kid have died too. All right, just these were the kids that he grew up with. Also, Cesare, everyone's like Cesare killed him because Cesare wanted his position. If Cesare, this is because Cesare ended up leading armies, right? But if Cesare wanted to lead an army, he still could have, even if his brother was alive. You have to think Cesare was the second son, so his position was a cardinal. He was first a bishop. He was made bishop of Pamplona as soon as Alexander became pope, and then made cardinal. So the legend has it that he didn't want to be a cardinal, he didn't want to not marry, he didn't want all of this, he wanted to be a leader in combat. You're perfectly fine to lead armies even as a bishop or as a cardinal or even as a pope, as we'll see with Pope Julius II later on, okay? So nothing was standing in the way of him doing all of these things, and obviously not in the way of him marrying and having children, apparently, based on what his father's doing. So I don't really buy it that he wanted his brother dead to get his position, because he will get his position once his brother's dead, right? However, the story that people have built on top of this throughout the years has Cesare killing him also because Cesare is one of the last people that saw him alive, right? So it was most likely there were a number of people that could have hated him. So, for example, the Orsini family are a family of barons, which are the family that actually are related in some way to them as well, because they tried to marry into them, because often he would try to marry his kids or family off to families that he wanted to be related with for political reasons. But still, the Orsini family were a very problematic family for anyone who's a pope in Rome at the time, because they are so powerful in Rome. And one of their members was in prison, and because of the Borgias who had put him in prison, and he died there. And so, that made the Orsini family very, very upset with them. So this was in the days leading up. Then there was the Sforza family from Milan, and they had a lot of reasons to be very angry with the Borgias, okay? In fact, in the days leading up to this, some servants of one of the Sforza members had killed some of the servants from Juan Borgia. So there had been, issues in the days leading up to this. And there had been something very, very big which had happened with the Sforzas, which had created big embarrassment and big reason for a vendetta that had been done to the Sforza. Someone of the Sforza family had been offended publicly in front of all of Italy in the worst of ways that you can imagine for a man of those times, okay? This I will tell you about in the next episode.